In a world where tradition often trumps talent, where gender determines opportunity more than skill, and where a single moment can shatter centuries of prejudice, sometimes it takes just 15 perfect shots to rewrite history. This is the story of a woman who walked into a place where she was told she didn't belong, faced down skeptical eyes and closed minds, and proved that excellence knows no boundaries. What happened next didn't just change her life. It changed an entire sport forever. Some say it was luck. Others call it destiny. But those who witnessed it know the truth. It was 15 moments of pure, undeniable precision that forced a world to confront its own limitations. This is that story, raw, real, and absolutely true. Sarah Mitchell had always been different. Growing up in the small farming town of Cedar Creek, she spent her childhood afternoons not playing with dolls or learning to cook, but in her grandfather's barn, holding his old hunting rifle with steady hands that seemed to know exactly where to point. Her father, a practical man who ran the local hardware store, initially dismissed her interest as a phase. Her mother worried it wasn't ladylike. But Sarah's grandfather, a World War II veteran named Frank, saw something special in the way she handled a weapon. The barn became her sanctuary. Every day after school, while other girls her age were at dance classes or helping their mothers with household chores, Sarah was learning the fundamentals of marksmanship. Frank taught her everything: how to breathe, how to stand, how to let her heartbeat settle between shots. He showed her how to clean and maintain firearms, how to calculate wind speed and distance, and, most importantly, how to find that perfect moment of stillness where the world seemed to hold its breath. By the time Sarah turned 16, she could outshoot most of the men in town. The local sheriff, Tom Bradley, often brought his deputies to Frank's property for training, and they quickly learned to respect the quiet teenager who could put 5 shots through the same hole at 50 yards. But respect in Cedar Creek and acceptance in the wider world were two very different things. Sarah's talent became local legend. At county fairs, people would gather to watch the hardware store owner's daughter demonstrate her skills. She could hit moving targets, split playing cards edgewise, and perform trick shots that left audiences amazed. Local newspapers wrote small articles about this sharpshooter girl, but these stories never traveled far beyond the county lines. The real world, Sarah would learn, had very different rules. When Sarah graduated high school in 1967, the country was changing. Women were fighting for equal rights, challenging traditional roles, and demanding access to spaces previously reserved for men. But the world of competitive shooting remained stubbornly male-dominated. The National Shooting Association had been exclusively male since its founding in 1871, and despite growing pressure from civil rights groups, they showed no signs of changing their membership policies. Sarah's dreams of competitive shooting seemed impossible until she met Marcus Webb, a former Olympic shooter who had moved to Cedar Creek to teach at the local college. Marcus had heard rumors about the young woman who could outshoot anyone in 3 counties, and his curiosity led him to Frank's barn on a crisp October afternoon. What Marcus witnessed that day convinced him that Sarah possessed something rare, not just exceptional skill, but the mental discipline and competitive fire needed for elite-level shooting. Her technique was flawless, her concentration absolute, and her accuracy consistently extraordinary. More importantly, she had the ability to perform under pressure, a quality that separated good shooters from great ones. Marcus became Sarah's mentor and advocate. He helped her refine her technique, introduced her to different disciplines within the sport, and, most crucially, began the long process of trying to find her opportunities to compete. This proved more difficult than either of them anticipated. The shooting clubs in nearby cities wouldn't accept female members. The state competitions were closed to women. Even informal shooting matches often excluded female participants, citing everything from insurance concerns to traditional values. Sarah found herself caught in a frustrating cycle. She needed competition experience to improve, but couldn't get competition experience because she was female. For 2 years, Sarah continued training with Marcus while working part-time at her father's hardware store. She competed in unofficial matches when possible, usually against men who initially underestimated her and left humbled. Word of her abilities spread slowly through the tight-knit shooting community, creating a strange phenomenon where she was simultaneously famous and unknown, celebrated in whispered conversations but denied formal recognition. The breakthrough came in an unexpected way. In 1969, the Riverside Shooting Club, one of the most prestigious facilities in the state, found itself embroiled in a discrimination lawsuit. A group of civil rights lawyers had targeted the club's whites-only membership policy, and the resulting legal pressure had forced them to integrate racially. The club's leadership, desperate to appear progressive and avoid further legal troubles, quietly began discussing whether they should also address their men-only policy. Marcus, who had connections at Riverside through his Olympic career, heard about these internal discussions. He saw an opportunity and began a careful campaign to get Sarah considered for membership. He submitted her shooting records, provided character references, and gradually built support among some of the club's more progressive members. The process took months. Sarah would later describe this period as one of the most frustrating of her life. She continued training, knowing that somewhere, men were debating whether she deserved the right to compete alongside them. The uncertainty was exhausting, but it also fueled her determination to prove herself beyond any doubt. In March 1970, Sarah received a letter that would change her life. The Riverside Shooting Club had voted to accept her application for membership, making her the first woman ever admitted to the organization. The vote had been close, 12 in favor, 10 against, with 3 abstentions, but it was enough. The letter came with conditions. Sarah would be admitted on a probationary basis. She would have access to the facilities during specific hours when her presence would be least disruptive. She would be expected to maintain the highest standards of conduct and shooting performance. Most importantly, she would be required to demonstrate her abilities in a formal evaluation overseen by the club's board of directors. Sarah understood what this meant. She wouldn't just be representing herself. She would be representing every woman who might follow in her footsteps. The pressure was enormous, but so was the opportunity. The evaluation was scheduled for a Saturday morning in April. Sarah spent weeks preparing, practicing different disciplines and scenarios she might face. Marcus helped her anticipate the psychological pressure she would experience, knowing that her evaluators would likely be skeptical, if not openly hostile. The night before her evaluation, Sarah couldn't sleep. She walked around her family's small house, checking and rechecking her equipment, rehearsing her routine, and trying to calm her racing mind. Her parents, who had initially been skeptical of her shooting ambitions, had become her strongest supporters. Her father had closed the hardware store for the day so he could drive her to Riverside. Her mother had spent the evening preparing Sarah's favorite meal, knowing it might be the last peaceful moment before everything changed. Frank, now in his 70s but still sharp, gave Sarah the advice that would stay with her forever. "Don't shoot to prove them wrong," he said, gripping her shoulder with weathered hands. "Shoot to prove yourself right. You know what you can do. Just do it." As dawn broke over Cedar Creek, Sarah loaded her equipment into her father's truck. The Riverside Shooting Club was a 3-hour drive away, and she would spend those hours in quiet contemplation, mentally preparing for the most important shooting session of her life. She had no way of knowing that she was about to become part of history, that her performance that day would be talked about for decades, or that 15 perfect shots would shatter barriers that had stood for nearly a century. All she knew was that she had worked her entire life for this moment, and she wouldn't waste it. The revolution was about to begin, one bullseye at a time. The Riverside Shooting Club sat on 48 acres of perfectly manicured grounds, its imposing brick facade and manicured lawn speaking of old money and older traditions. As Sarah's father pulled their dusty pickup truck through the wrought iron gates, she felt the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. This was hallowed ground in the shooting world, a place where Olympic champions had trained and national records had been set. The parking lot was already half full when they arrived, despite the early hour. Word of Sarah's evaluation had spread through the shooting community like wildfire, and Spectators had come from across the state to witness what many believed would be either a historic moment or a spectacular failure. Some had come to support her. Others hoped to see her fail and preserve the status quo they cherished. Marcus Webb was waiting by the entrance, his usual calm demeanor doing little to hide his nervousness. He had staked his reputation on Sarah's abilities, and if she failed today, his influence in the shooting world would suffer significantly. But as he watched her emerge from the truck with steady movements and focused eyes, his confidence returned. This was the same young woman he had watched put 20 consecutive shots through a target the size of a silver dollar. If anyone could handle the pressure, it was Sarah Mitchell. The club's interior was intimidating in its grandeur. Dark wood paneling lined the walls, decorated with portraits of past champions and display cases filled with trophies dating back to the club's founding. The smell of gun oil and leather mixed with the faint aroma of expensive cigars, creating an atmosphere that was both welcoming and exclusionary. This was a gentleman's club in the truest sense, and Sarah was acutely aware that she was the first woman to walk these halls as anything other than a guest. Club president Richard Hartwell greeted them in the main lobby. A distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and an expensive suit, Hartwell represented the old guard of American shooting sports. He had been one of the 3 members who abstained from the membership vote, unwilling to support change, but pragmatic enough to recognize its inevitability. "Miss Mitchell," he said, extending his hand with professional courtesy. "Welcome to Riverside. I trust you understand the significance of today's proceedings." Sarah shook his hand firmly, meeting his gaze directly. "I understand perfectly, Mr. Hartwell. I'm grateful for the opportunity." The evaluation would take place on the club's premier outdoor range, a state-of-the-art facility that had hosted numerous national competitions. As they walked toward the range, Sarah could see other members gathering to watch. Some nodded politely. Others turned away or whispered among themselves. The diversity of reactions told her everything she needed to know about the internal politics of her situation. The board of directors was assembled when they reached the range. 12 men in various stages of middle age, all accomplished shooters in their own right, all uncertain about what they were witnessing. Some looked genuinely curious about her abilities. Others appeared skeptical or even hostile. Sarah recognized the challenge immediately. She wasn't just being evaluated on her shooting skills, but on her ability to maintain composure under the most intense scrutiny imaginable. Board member James Morrison, a former national champion, would oversee the technical aspects of the evaluation. He was known for his fairness and expertise, qualities that worked in Sarah's favor. Morrison explained the format. Sarah would be tested in 3 disciplines: precision rifle shooting at 100 yards, rapid-fire pistol, and practical shooting scenarios. Each discipline would involve 5 shots, and her performance would be evaluated not just on accuracy, but on consistency, technique, and mental composure. The precision rifle test would come first. Sarah unpacked her equipment methodically, checking each component with practiced efficiency. Her rifle was a custom-built precision instrument that Marcus had helped her acquire, chambered in .308 Winchester and equipped with a high-quality scope. She had fired thousands of rounds through this weapon, and it felt like an extension of her body. The target was positioned 100 yards downrange, a standard bullseye with scoring rings clearly marked. Perfect shots would score 10 points, hitting the center ring barely larger than a quarter. The wind was calm, conditions were ideal, and Sarah felt her training take over as she prepared for her first shot. The gathered crowd fell silent as Sarah assumed her shooting position. She could feel dozens of eyes watching her every movement, analyzing her stance, her breathing, her grip. The pressure was unlike anything she had experienced, but her grandfather's training served her well. She found her center, controlled her breathing, and let the world narrow to just the target and the crosshairs. Her first shot broke cleanly, the report echoing across the range. Through the spotting scope, the target showed a perfect bullseye, dead center, scoring a 10. A murmur ran through the crowd, but Sarah barely heard it. She was already preparing for her second shot, her mind completely focused on the task at hand. The second shot was even better, if such a thing was possible. It struck so close to the first that the holes nearly touched. The third shot expanded the group only slightly. By the fourth shot, even the skeptics in the crowd were paying serious attention. Sarah was shooting at a level that many of them had never personally witnessed. The fifth and final shot of the rifle test was the most important. Sarah could feel the expectations of everyone watching, the weight of history, the knowledge that her entire future might depend on this single trigger pull. She settled into her position, found her natural point of aim, controlled her breathing, and squeezed the trigger with perfect follow-through. The shot was perfect. 5 holes in the center of the target, grouped so tightly they could be covered by a quarter. The official scorer called out 50 points, perfect score, and the crowd erupted in applause that was equal parts admiration and surprise. But Sarah knew the rifle test was just the beginning. The rapid-fire pistol challenge would be more difficult, requiring her to engage 5 targets in a limited time frame while maintaining accuracy under time pressure. This discipline would test not just her shooting skills, but her ability to think and move quickly while maintaining precision. Sarah selected her competition pistol, a .45 caliber 1911 that had been customized for accuracy and reliability. She had practiced rapid fire extensively, but never under such intense observation. The format called for her to draw from a holster and engage 5 steel targets positioned at varying distances, with only 8 seconds to complete the course. The signal to begin came as a sharp whistle blast. Sarah's draw was smooth and fast, her first shot engaging the nearest target with a satisfying metallic ring. She moved methodically through the course, each shot deliberate and controlled despite the time pressure. Her training had taught her that speed came from efficiency, not hurry, and she applied this principle perfectly. All 5 targets fell in sequence. Each struck cleanly with rounds that would have been scoring hits in any competition. Sarah's time was recorded at 6.8 seconds, fast enough to be competitive at the national level, accurate enough to satisfy the most demanding critic. The crowd's reaction was more subdued this time, but she could see grudging respect in the faces of her evaluators. The final test would be the most challenging, a practical shooting scenario designed to simulate real-world conditions. Sarah would need to navigate a course that included multiple positions, varying distances, and targets that required different levels of precision. This was the type of shooting that separated technicians from true marksmen, and everyone present knew it would be the ultimate test of her abilities. The course was complex, requiring Sarah to move between shooting positions while engaging targets that ranged from close-range rapid-fire scenarios to precision shots at extended distances. She would use both rifle and pistol, transitioning between weapons while maintaining safety protocols and time constraints. It was the kind of challenge that could humble even experienced competitors. Sarah studied the course layout carefully, planning her route and visualizing each engagement. This type of mental preparation was crucial for success, and her methodical approach impressed several board members who recognized good tactical thinking when they saw it. The course began with a rapid-fire pistol sequence at close range, followed by a sprint to a rifle position for precision shots at 200 yards, then back to pistol work from an unconventional shooting position. The final stage required her to engage small targets while moving, a challenge that tested every aspect of her shooting skills simultaneously. When the start signal sounded, Sarah moved with purpose and precision. Her close-range pistol work was flawless, each shot finding its mark with mechanical precision. The transition to rifle was smooth and efficient, and her long-range shots were delivered with the same accuracy she had demonstrated all morning. The final movement stage showcased her ability to shoot accurately while under physical stress, a skill that impressed even her harshest critics. When the course was complete, Sarah had achieved something remarkable. She had not missed a single scoring zone on any target throughout the entire practical shooting test. Her accuracy was perfect, her time was competitive, and her technique had been flawless under pressure that would have rattled many veteran competitors. As the evaluators tallied her scores and conferred among themselves, Sarah allowed herself a moment to breathe. She had done everything possible to prove her worthiness for membership at Riverside. Whatever happened next was beyond her control, but she knew she had represented herself and all women shooters with distinction. The deliberation seemed to last forever, but it was actually only 20 minutes before Richard Hartwell approached with the results. His expression was unreadable, giving no hint of the decision that had been reached. The crowd gathered closer, sensing that history was about to be made one way or another. "Miss Mitchell," Hartwell began, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet range. "In 30 years of club membership, I have never witnessed a more impressive display of marksmanship under pressure." Sarah felt her heart racing, but she maintained her composure as Hartwell continued. "Your performance today has exceeded every expectation and answered every question about your qualifications. It is my pleasure to inform you that your probationary membership has been approved unanimously." The word unanimously hit Sarah like a physical force. Even the members who had opposed her admission had been swayed by her performance. She had not just passed their test. She had dominated it so completely that opposition became impossible to justify. As applause erupted around her, Sarah felt a mixture of triumph and relief wash over her. She had crossed the first major barrier in her journey toward competitive shooting greatness. But even as she savored this moment, she knew it was only the beginning. Membership at Riverside opened doors, but she would still have to prove herself every single day. The revolution had begun, and Sarah Mitchell was just getting started. The months following Sarah's acceptance at Riverside brought a whirlwind of changes and challenges she hadn't anticipated. News of her unanimous approval spread quickly through the shooting community, generating reactions that ranged from celebration to outright hostility. She received letters of congratulation from women across the country, thanking her for opening a door they had thought permanently closed. But she also faced criticism from traditionalists who viewed her membership as the beginning of the end for their exclusive world. Sarah's training schedule intensified dramatically. Marcus had connections throughout the competitive shooting circuit, and he was determined to get Sarah into her first sanctioned competition as quickly as possible. They both understood that her Riverside membership, while historically significant, was meaningless unless she could translate it into competitive opportunities. The challenge was finding competitions that would accept female participants. The National Shooting Association still maintained its men-only policy for sanctioned events, and most state-level competitions followed their lead. Sarah found herself in a frustrating position. She had proven her skills beyond doubt, but the infrastructure of competitive shooting remained closed to her. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, a psychiatrist and shooting enthusiast from Chicago, had been following Sarah's story through shooting publications and personal connections. Dr. Warren had fought her own battles for acceptance in the male-dominated medical field, and she recognized a kindred spirit in Sarah's struggle. More importantly, she had the financial resources and social connections to create opportunities where none existed. Dr. Warren contacted Sarah through Marcus, proposing the creation of an invitational shooting match that would welcome competitors regardless of gender. The Chicago Open, as it came to be known, would feature substantial prize money, attract top-level competitors, and, most importantly, give Sarah a platform to demonstrate her abilities against the nation's best shooters. The idea was brilliant in its simplicity. By creating a private competition with attractive prizes, Dr. Warren could entice established champions to participate alongside Sarah. The promise of significant prize money would overcome any reluctance to compete against a woman, and the prestigious format would ensure serious competition rather than a novelty exhibition. Sarah threw herself into preparation for the Chicago Open with the intensity of an Olympic athlete. She trained 6 days a week, working on every aspect of her shooting while also studying her potential competitors. Marcus brought in additional coaches to work on specific skills, and Sarah began competing in informal matches throughout the Midwest to gain experience against different shooting styles and personalities. The physical demands of elite-level shooting surprised many people who didn't understand the sport. Precision shooting required extraordinary body control, the ability to manage heart rate, and breathing under intense pressure, and the muscular endurance to maintain perfect positions for extended periods. Sarah developed a comprehensive fitness regimen that included cardiovascular training, strength work specifically designed for shooters, and meditation techniques to enhance her mental focus. But perhaps more challenging than the physical preparation was dealing with the psychological pressure of her unique position. Sarah wasn't just trying to win competitions. She was representing all women who aspired to compete in shooting sports. Every mistake she made would be magnified, every success questioned, and every interaction scrutinized for signs of favoritism or bias. The media attention was overwhelming. Sports Illustrated sent a photographer to document her training, and newspapers across the country ran feature stories about the woman challenging shooting sports gender barriers. Sarah handled the attention with grace and dignity, but the constant interviews and photo sessions took time away from her training and added another layer of pressure to her already intense preparation. As the Chicago Open approached, the field of competitors became increasingly impressive. Richard Morrison, the reigning national pistol champion, committed to compete. David Chun, an Olympic medalist in rifle shooting, entered multiple events. Even Thomas Bradford, a legendary figure in practical shooting, announced his participation. These were not men coming to patronize a groundbreaking woman. They were serious competitors attracted by serious prize money. The week before the competition, Sarah moved to Chicago to acclimate to the shooting facilities and complete her final preparations. Dr. Warren had arranged for her to stay at an exclusive hotel near the range, and Marcus had coordinated with local coaches to fine-tune her techniques. But nothing could prepare Sarah for the intensity of the pre-competition atmosphere. The Chicago Gun Club, venue for the Open, was buzzing with activity as competitors arrived from across the country. Sarah could feel the eyes following her as she walked through the facility, could hear the whispered conversations that stopped when she approached. Some competitors made a point of introducing themselves and welcoming her. Others maintained a polite but distant attitude. A few were openly skeptical, questioning whether her presence would somehow diminish the competition's legitimacy. Sarah's response to this scrutiny was to let her performance speak for itself. During practice sessions, she shot with quiet competence that gradually earned grudging respect from even her harshest critics. Her technique was flawless, her consistency remarkable, and her mental toughness evident to anyone who cared to observe. The first day of competition featured precision rifle events at various distances. Sarah had drawn a challenging position in the shooting order, competing in the middle of the field when nerves and expectations were at their peak. The morning qualification rounds would determine the final field for afternoon elimination matches, making every shot crucial. Sarah's first competition shots at the Chicago Open were perfection itself. Her rifle technique, honed through thousands of practice rounds, functioned flawlessly under the pressure of real competition. She advanced easily through the qualifying rounds, posting scores that placed her among the top performers across all events. But it was during the elimination rounds that Sarah truly announced her arrival as a serious competitor. Facing Richard Morrison in a head-to-head precision shooting match, she demonstrated the mental toughness that separated champions from also-rans. Morrison was shooting excellently, but Sarah matched him shot for shot, never allowing the pressure to affect her technique or confidence. The decisive moment came with the final shot of their match. Morrison, feeling the pressure of competing against a woman he couldn't afford to lose to, pulled his shot slightly left of center. Sarah, shooting immediately after, delivered a perfect bullseye that secured her victory and stunned the assembled crowd. She had just defeated the reigning national champion in his strongest discipline. The crowd's reaction was electric. Some spectators cheered wildly, recognizing they had witnessed history. Others sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had seen. But the reaction that mattered most to Sarah was the handshake and congratulations from Morrison himself, who demonstrated the class and sportsmanship that defined the best competitors. Sarah's success in rifle competition was impressive, but her performance in practical shooting events was revolutionary. This discipline combined accuracy, speed, and tactical thinking in ways that showcased every aspect of her shooting skills. The courses were complex, demanding split-second decisions while maintaining precision under time pressure. The practical shooting final pitted Sarah against 8 of the country's best tactical shooters, men who had honed their skills in military service, law enforcement, and years of competition. The course was the most challenging of the entire event, featuring multiple weapon systems, varied shooting positions, and targets that required different levels of precision. Sarah approached the course with a methodical planning that had become her trademark. She studied every target, calculated optimal shooting positions, and visualized her movement through each stage. When her turn came to shoot, she executed her plan with mechanical precision that left spectators amazed. Her performance was flawless. Every target was engaged cleanly, every transition was smooth, and her final time was competitive with the very best tactical shooters in the country. When the scores were announced, Sarah had not just won the practical shooting championship. She had set a new course record in the process. The victory was significant not just for its competitive merit, but for what it represented. Practical shooting was considered the most masculine of the shooting disciplines, emphasizing speed, power, and tactical thinking over pure precision. Sarah's dominance in this area shattered stereotypes and proved that her success wasn't limited to any particular style of shooting. As word of her victory spread, the atmosphere at the Chicago Open shifted dramatically. What had begun as skeptical curiosity transformed into genuine admiration for Sarah's abilities. Competitors who had been dismissive before now sought her out for technical discussions. Media representatives who had come expecting a novelty story found themselves documenting a legitimate sporting breakthrough. But Sarah's most important victory was yet to come. The final event of the Chicago Open was a combined competition that tested every shooting discipline over 2 days of intense competition. It was designed to crown an overall champion, and the field included every top performer from the individual events. The combined competition format was brutal. Competitors would face precision rifle shooting, rapid-fire pistol, practical shooting scenarios, and even some specialty events like long-range shooting and competitive clay target events. Only the most well-rounded shooters could hope to excel across such diverse challenges, and the physical and mental demands would test everyone's limits. Sarah entered the combined competition knowing that victory here would cement her status as a legitimate elite-level competitor. But she also understood that failure would provide ammunition for those who claimed her individual victories were flukes or the result of favorable circumstances. The competition began with precision rifle work at extended ranges, testing not just shooting skills, but the ability to read wind and environmental conditions. Sarah's background training with her grandfather proved invaluable here, as she demonstrated the fieldcraft skills that many indoor range specialists lacked. As the competition progressed through different disciplines, Sarah's consistency became her greatest asset. While other competitors might excel in their specialty areas but struggle in unfamiliar disciplines, Sarah performed at a high level across every event. Her training had been comprehensive, and it showed in her ability to adapt quickly to changing challenges. The final stage of the combined competition was a marathon practical shooting course that incorporated elements from every previous event. Competitors would need to demonstrate precision rifle work, rapid pistol shooting, and tactical movement all within a single complex scenario. It was designed to separate the truly elite competitors from everyone else. Sarah approached the final course with quiet confidence. She had studied every stage, planned her approach carefully, and prepared herself mentally for the most challenging shooting test of her life. When the start signal sounded, she moved with the fluid precision of a master craftsperson, engaging each challenge with focused intensity. Her performance was extraordinary. Every shot found its mark, every movement was purposeful, and her final time was faster than any competitor had achieved. When the results were announced, Sarah Mitchell had not just won the combined championship. She had dominated it completely. The victory was total and undeniable. Sarah had proven herself against the best shooters in the country, in fair competition with identical equipment and conditions. There could be no asterisks, no excuses, and no dismissive explanations. She was simply the best shooter at the Chicago Open, and everyone present knew it. As she stood on the podium accepting her trophy, Sarah felt the weight of history on her shoulders. She had not just won a shooting competition. She had shattered barriers that had stood for a century. The little girl who learned to shoot in her grandfather's barn had become a revolutionary, proving that excellence knows no gender. But even as she savored this moment of triumph, Sarah knew that her real work was just beginning. The Chicago Open had opened doors, but walking through them would require even greater challenges ahead. Sarah's victories at the Chicago Open created shockwaves throughout the shooting sports world that extended far beyond the competition itself. Overnight, she became a symbol of change in a sport that had resisted change for over a century. But with recognition came scrutiny, and with success came pressure that threatened to overwhelm even her exceptional mental toughness. The immediate aftermath of Chicago brought a flood of opportunities and challenges that would have been unimaginable just months earlier. Equipment manufacturers approached her with endorsement deals. Shooting magazines requested interviews and technical articles. Most importantly, competition organizers who had previously excluded women began reconsidering their policies, not out of progressive idealism, but because Sarah had proven that women could compete at the highest levels. However, the most significant development was an unexpected phone call from Colonel James Patterson, director of the National Shooting Championships. The NSC represented the pinnacle of American shooting sports, an annual competition that had crowned national champions for 53 consecutive years. It was also the most exclusive shooting event in the country, with membership in the National Shooting Association required for participation. Colonel Patterson's call was brief and formal, but its implications were enormous. The NSA Board of Directors had voted to extend a special invitation to Sarah for the upcoming national championships, despite their continued policy of excluding women from regular membership. It was an unprecedented decision that represented both recognition of her abilities and acknowledgement that ignoring her achievements was becoming impossible. The invitation came with conditions that were clearly designed to minimize controversy while maximizing the association's ability to manage the situation. Sarah would compete in a separate exhibition category, not eligible for official national championship titles, but allowed to participate in all events alongside male competitors. Her scores would be recorded and published, but she would receive exhibition awards rather than championship trophies. Sarah understood the politics behind the invitation immediately. The NSA was trying to have it both ways, appearing progressive by including her while maintaining their discriminatory membership policies. She was being offered a chance to compete at the highest level, but as a second-class participant whose achievements would carry unofficial status. Marcus strongly advised her to accept the invitation despite its obvious inequities. Take what they're offering now, he urged during a late-night strategy session at her hotel. Prove yourself at their championships, and the pressure for full membership will become irresistible. Sometimes revolution requires patience. But Sarah faced opposition from unexpected quarters. Dr. Warren and several women's rights organizations urged her to reject the invitation unless she was offered full competitive status. They argued that accepting second-class treatment would legitimize the NSA's discriminatory policies and set back the cause of women's equality in shooting sports. The decision tortured Sarah for weeks. She wanted desperately to compete at the national championships, knowing it represented the ultimate test of her abilities. But she also understood that her choices carried implications far beyond her personal ambitions. Whatever she decided would affect every woman who might seek to follow in her footsteps. The solution came from Sarah's grandfather, Frank, whose simple wisdom cut through the political complexities surrounding the situation. "Sarah," he told her during one of their regular phone conversations, "you can't change minds you can't reach. These people need to see what you can do before they'll believe what you can do. Get in there, show them, and let the results speak for themselves." Sarah accepted the invitation to the national championships, but she did so with a clear statement of her intentions. At a press conference in Chicago, she announced that she would compete not just to prove her own abilities, but to demonstrate that women deserved full equality in competitive shooting. She made it clear that her participation was a step toward complete integration, not acceptance of permanent second-class status. The announcement generated intense media coverage and polarized reactions throughout the shooting community. Progressive voices celebrated her courage and determination. Conservative factions denounced what they saw as the politicization of their sport. But beneath the public rhetoric, serious competitors were asking a simple question. Could Sarah Mitchell actually win the national championships if she had been allowed to compete for official titles? The national championships were held annually at Camp Perry, Ohio, a sprawling military facility that had hosted the competition since 1907. The week-long event attracted nearly 1,000 competitors from across the country, representing every discipline within the shooting sports. It was not just a competition, but a gathering of the shooting community's elite, a place where reputations were made and legends were born. Sarah's arrival at Camp Perry created a circus atmosphere that threatened to overshadow the actual competition. Media representatives outnumbered competitors for the first time in the event's history. Television crews followed her practice sessions, and photographers documented her every movement. The attention was overwhelming, but Sarah had learned to compartmentalize external pressures and focus on her shooting. The reaction from fellow competitors was mixed, but generally respectful. Most of the men who had reached the national championships were serious enough about shooting to appreciate exceptional skill regardless of its source. They had heard about Sarah's Chicago Open victories, and many were genuinely curious to see how she would perform against the deepest field of elite shooters in the country. Sarah's practice sessions drew crowds that interfered with other competitors' preparations. Range officials eventually had to establish special viewing areas to manage the spectators who came to watch the woman who had supposedly revolutionized shooting sports. The attention was flattering, but also disruptive, and Sarah worried about how the media circus was affecting other competitors. The opening ceremonies of the national championships traditionally featured speeches from shooting sports luminaries and the presentation of special awards recognizing lifetime achievements. This year, however, the ceremony included an unprecedented acknowledgement of Sarah's participation. Colonel Patterson introduced her as a distinguished exhibition competitor whose presence represented the evolving nature of our sport. The careful language of her introduction told Sarah everything she needed to know about the NSA's attitude. She was being tolerated rather than welcomed, included as a gesture rather than embraced as an equal. But she also recognized that even this grudging acceptance represented progress, and she was determined to make the most of the opportunity. The first day of competition featured precision rifle events at multiple distances, traditionally the most prestigious discipline at the national championships. Sarah had drawn a middle position in the shooting order, meaning she would compete when the pressure was highest and the margin for error smallest. The morning conditions were challenging, with shifting winds that would test every competitor's ability to read environmental factors. Sarah's approach to the competition was methodical and professional. She had studied the course, analyzed wind patterns, and prepared herself mentally for the challenges ahead. But nothing could fully prepare her for the intensity of competing among the nation's best shooters while carrying the weight of historic expectations. Her first shots were solid, but not spectacular, placing her in the middle of the pack after the opening round. Some observers interpreted this as evidence that she couldn't handle the pressure of championship competition. But Sarah was simply finding her rhythm, adapting to the unique conditions and atmosphere of the national championships. As the day progressed, Sarah's shooting became increasingly impressive. Her consistency was remarkable, and her ability to maintain concentration despite constant scrutiny gradually earned the respect of competitors and spectators alike. By the end of the first day, she was firmly positioned among the top performers in every event she had entered. The second day featured rapid-fire pistol competition, an event that favored competitors with exceptional hand-eye coordination and the ability to maintain accuracy under time pressure. Sarah had always excelled in this discipline, and her confidence showed as she prepared for what many considered her best chance for a dominant performance. The rapid-fire event format was unforgiving. Competitors had limited time to engage multiple targets, and even minor mistakes were severely penalized. The field included several former Olympic competitors and current world record holders, making it the strongest rapid-fire field ever assembled at the national championships. Sarah's performance in the rapid-fire event was spectacular. Her draw was smooth and fast, her target transitions were flawless, and her accuracy was virtually perfect throughout the day's competition. When the final scores were tallied, she had not just won the exhibition category, she had posted the highest score of any competitor, male or female, in the entire event. The victory was undeniable and historically significant. Sarah had not just competed against the nation's best rapid-fire shooters. She had beaten them convincingly in fair competition. The achievement silenced many critics and provided irrefutable evidence that her success was based on skill rather than novelty or special treatment. But the most important test was yet to come. The final day of the national championships featured the president's match, a combined competition that determined the overall national champion. It was the most prestigious title in American shooting, and victory would establish Sarah as the best competitive shooter in the country, regardless of gender. The president's match format was brutal, requiring competitors to demonstrate proficiency across multiple disciplines over a 12-hour period. Only the top 50 shooters from the week's preliminary events qualified to compete, and the field included every major figure in competitive shooting. It was designed to identify the most complete shooter in the country, the competitor who could excel under any conditions and in any discipline. Sarah's qualification for the president's match was itself historic. No woman had ever reached this level of national championship competition. But qualification was just the beginning. To prove her point completely, she needed to not just compete, but win against the strongest field ever assembled. The match began with precision rifle work at extreme ranges, testing not just shooting skills, but the ability to make precise calculations under pressure. Sarah's mathematical background served her well here, as she quickly adapted to the challenging conditions and posted scores that kept her competitive with the leaders. As the competition progressed through different disciplines, Sarah's comprehensive training became increasingly apparent. While some specialists struggled outside their primary areas, Sarah maintained consistent high performance across every challenge. Her versatility was her greatest strength, allowing her to remain competitive even when she wasn't dominating individual events. The turning point came during the practical shooting portion of the president's match. This was Sarah's strongest discipline, and she approached the complex course with quiet confidence that her training would carry her through. The course was the most challenging ever designed for a national championship, incorporating precision shooting, rapid engagement, and tactical movement in ways that would test every aspect of a competitor's skills. Sarah's run through the practical shooting course was perfect. Every shot found its target, every movement was efficient, and her final time was faster than any competitor had achieved. When the scores were announced, she had not just won the practical shooting portion. She had set a new national record in the process. The record-setting performance changed the entire dynamic of the president's match. Sarah was no longer just competing against the men. She was dominating them. Her comprehensive skills and mental toughness were proving superior to competitors who had been national champions and Olympic medalists. The final stage of the president's match was a long-range precision shooting test that would determine the overall champion. Competitors would engage targets at distances up to 800 yards, requiring perfect technique and the ability to read environmental conditions with extraordinary precision. It was the ultimate test of shooting skill, and Sarah approached it with the quiet confidence of someone who had trained for exactly this moment. The wind was tricky, shifting direction and velocity in ways that made precise calculation difficult. Many competitors struggled with the conditions, posting scores well below their usual standards. But Sarah's training with her grandfather had prepared her for exactly these challenges, and she read the conditions with the skill of a master marksman. Her first shot was perfect, striking the center of a target that most competitors were struggling to hit at all. Her second shot was even better. As she progressed through the course, it became clear that she was shooting at a level that transcended normal competitive standards. The final shot of Sarah's president's match came with thousands of people watching and the knowledge that history hung in the balance. She settled into her shooting position with the calm precision that had become her trademark, found her natural point of aim, controlled her breathing, and delivered a shot that would be remembered for generations. The shot was perfect, striking the exact center of the target and securing Sarah's victory in the most prestigious shooting competition in America. When the final scores were announced, she had not just won the president's match. She had won it by the largest margin in the event's 53-year history. As Sarah stood to acknowledge the thunderous applause that erupted across Camp Perry, she realized that she had achieved something far more significant than a shooting competition victory. She had proven beyond any possible doubt that excellence in shooting sports had nothing to do with gender and everything to do with skill, dedication, and mental toughness. The revolution was complete, and the sport would never be the same. The immediate aftermath of Sarah's president's match victory was unlike anything the shooting sports world had ever experienced. Her record-breaking performance had been broadcast live on television for the first time in national championships history, bringing her achievement to an audience of millions who had never previously shown interest in competitive shooting. Overnight, Sarah Mitchell became not just a shooting sports champion, but a national symbol of determination and excellence. The victory celebration at Camp Perry was emotional and historic. Fellow competitors, many of whom had initially been skeptical of her participation, lined up to congratulate her with genuine respect and admiration. Colonel Patterson, who had extended the original invitation with obvious reluctance, found himself praising her achievement in terms that would have been unthinkable just weeks earlier. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came when Richard Morrison, the champion Sarah had defeated months earlier at Chicago, approached her with a special presentation. On behalf of the assembled competitors, he offered Sarah an honorary membership in an informal organization they had created on the spot, the President's Match Champions Club. It was their way of acknowledging that bureaucratic policies couldn't diminish the significance of what she had accomplished. The media response was overwhelming and largely positive. Sports Illustrated featured Sarah on their cover with the headline, "Perfect Shot, the woman who revolutionized shooting sports." The New York Times ran a lengthy profile exploring her journey from small-town hardware store employee to national champion. Television talk shows competed to book her for interviews, recognizing that her story resonated far beyond the shooting community. Sarah handled the media attention with the same composed professionalism she brought to competition. She understood that her platform carried responsibilities that extended beyond personal achievement. Every interview became an opportunity to advocate for women's equality in sports, to encourage young people to pursue shooting sports, and to demonstrate that excellence could emerge from the most unlikely circumstances. The political implications of Sarah's victory were immediate and significant. Within weeks of the president's match, 3 major shooting organizations announced policy changes that eliminated gender restrictions on membership and competition. The pressure for reform had become irresistible, as maintaining discriminatory policies in the face of Sarah's achievement appeared increasingly indefensible. The National Shooting Association faced the most intense pressure to change. Sarah's exhibition victory had exposed the absurdity of their position. How could they justify excluding from membership someone who had proven herself superior to every member in their organization? Progressive members within the NSA began organizing to force a membership vote on admitting women, while traditionalists fought a rearguard action to preserve their men-only policies. The internal battle within the NSA became a public relations disaster for the organization. Media coverage highlighted the contradiction between their discriminatory membership policies and Sarah's undeniable achievements. Corporate sponsors began questioning their support for an organization that excluded the nation's best competitive shooter. Young shooters started avoiding NSA events in protest of their policies. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, who had become Sarah's closest advisor and friend, coordinated a sophisticated campaign to pressure the NSA into reform. She organized letter-writing campaigns, coordinated media interviews with supportive competitors, and, most effectively, threatened to create a rival organization that would welcome all shooters regardless of gender. The threat of competition, finally, motivated the NSA leadership to act. 6 months after Sarah's president's match victory, the National Shooting Association held a special membership meeting to vote on eliminating gender restrictions. The debate was intense and sometimes bitter, with traditionalists arguing that admitting women would fundamentally alter the character of their organization. But the practical arguments for change proved overwhelming. The vote was closer than expected, but decisive. 847 in favor of admitting women, 623 opposed, with 89 abstentions. Sarah Mitchell became the first female member of the National Shooting Association, followed immediately by applications from dozens of other qualified women who had been waiting for the barrier to fall. Sarah's first official NSA competition was the following year's national championships, where she would compete not as an exhibition participant, but as a full member eligible for all titles and records. The pressure surrounding her return to Camp Perry was intense, with critics arguing that her previous victory had been a fluke and supporters expecting her to repeat her dominant performance. The 1971 National Championships featured the strongest field in the event's history, as top competitors were drawn by the combination of increased media attention and the desire to test themselves against the woman who had redefined their sport. Sarah approached the competition with quiet confidence, knowing that her training had been even more comprehensive than the previous year. Her performance was dominant from the first day. She won every individual event she entered, often by margins that would have been considered impossible in previous years. Her technique had improved through constant training. Her mental toughness had been strengthened by a year of intense scrutiny, and her competitive instincts had been sharpened by the knowledge that every performance was being measured against impossible standards. The president's match that year was Sarah's most complete competitive performance. She didn't just win. She demolished the competition by margins that established new standards for excellence in shooting sports. Her victory was so comprehensive that several records she set that week stood for more than a decade. But Sarah's impact extended far beyond her personal achievements. Her success inspired a generation of young women to take up shooting sports, dramatically increasing female participation at all levels of competition. Shooting clubs across the country reported unprecedented interest from women and girls who had seen Sarah's achievements and wanted to test their own potential. The changes Sarah catalyzed transformed shooting sports in ways that surprised even her strongest supporters. Women's participation grew exponentially, bringing new perspectives and approaches that enriched the sports culture. Technical innovations increased as manufacturers recognized the expanded market that female participation represented. Most importantly, the sport's image evolved from an exclusive men's club to a more inclusive community that welcomed anyone with the dedication to pursue excellence. Sarah continued competing at the highest levels for 8 more years, winning 5 additional presidents' matches and establishing herself as the most successful competitive shooter in American history. Her career statistics were staggering: 12 individual national championships for world records that stood for decades, and a competitive longevity that demonstrated the sustainability of her approach to the sport. Beyond competition, Sarah became an ambassador for shooting sports and women's athletics. She founded the Sarah Mitchell Foundation, which provided equipment and training opportunities for young shooters from disadvantaged backgrounds. The foundation particularly focused on encouraging girls to pursue shooting sports, offering scholarships, and mentoring programs that help hundreds of young women follow in Sarah's footsteps. Her coaching and instruction work revolutionized shooting sports education. Sarah's technical knowledge, combined with her understanding of the mental aspects of competition, made her one of the most sought-after instructors in the country. She developed training methods that are still used today, and many of the shooters she coached went on to achieve national and international success. Sarah's marriage to Marcus Webb in 1974 surprised no one who had observed their partnership over the years. Their relationship had evolved naturally from mentor and student to equal partners in both life and sport. Marcus continued coaching while Sarah competed, and their collaboration produced innovations in training methods that influenced an entire generation of competitive shooters. Their children grew up in the shooting sports community and both developed into accomplished competitive shooters themselves. Sarah's daughter, Jennifer, won her first national championship at age 16, while her son, Michael, became a successful Olympic coach. The family's continued involvement in shooting sports ensured that Sarah's influence would extend across multiple generations. As Sarah's competitive career wound down in the late 1970s, she transitioned seamlessly into leadership roles within the organizations she had forced to change. She served on the NSA Board of Directors, chaired the National Championships Organizing Committee, and played a crucial role in developing the sport's first comprehensive anti-discrimination policies. Her work in sports administration was as revolutionary as her competitive career had been. Sarah pushed for increased prize money, better media coverage, and improved facilities that benefited all competitors. She advocated for junior development programs that identified and nurtured young talent regardless of background or gender. The international impact of Sarah's achievements became apparent when she was invited to compete in the first World Shooting Championships that included women's events. Her participation helped legitimize women's competitive shooting on a global scale, and her victories in multiple disciplines demonstrated that American shooting sports had achieved a level of gender integration that other nations struggled to match. Sarah's influence on the Olympics was equally significant. Her advocacy and the success of the women she had inspired helped convince the International Olympic Committee to expand shooting sports opportunities for women. Events that had been men-only for decades were open to female competitors, and new disciplines specifically designed for women were added to the Olympic program. The recognition Sarah received over the years reflected the magnitude of her impact on sports and society. She was inducted into multiple halls of fame, received numerous awards for her advocacy work, and was recognized by organizations far beyond the shooting sports community. Universities awarded her honorary degrees, and women's rights organizations celebrated her as a pioneer who had opened doors in the most unexpected places. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from the shooting community itself. The President's Match Trophy was renamed the Sarah Mitchell Cup in 1995, ensuring that future generations of competitors would be reminded of the woman who had redefined their sport. The ceremony honoring the naming was attended by competitors from 5 decades, many of whom credited Sarah with either inspiring their participation or making their participation possible. As Sarah entered her 70s, her legacy was secure but still growing. The foundation she had established continued expanding opportunities for young shooters. The training methods she had developed were being used by coaches around the world. Most importantly, the barriers she had shattered remained permanently broken, and the sport she loved had become truly inclusive. The young women competing in shooting sports in the 21st century might not fully understand how revolutionary Sarah's achievements had been. They competed as equals, were accepted without question, and pursued excellence without artificial barriers. That this seemed natural and inevitable was perhaps Sarah's greatest achievement, She had changed not just policies, but culture, creating a world where her granddaughter could pursue shooting sports without ever questioning whether women belonged there. Sarah Mitchell's story became more than just an inspiring biography. It became a roadmap for challenging discrimination and pursuing excellence in the face of seemingly impossible odds. Her 15 perfect shots had indeed changed everything, proving that sometimes revolution comes not through grand gestures, but through quiet, undeniable competence. The little girl who had learned to shoot in her grandfather's barn had become a legend, but more importantly, she had become the architect of a more inclusive and excellent sporting world. Her legacy would endure as long as people understood that excellence knows no boundaries, and that determination can overcome even the most entrenched prejudices. In the end, Sarah Mitchell had done exactly what her grandfather had advised all those years ago. She hadn't shot to prove them wrong. She had shot to prove herself right. And in proving herself right, she had changed the world one perfect shot at a time.